Awesome. ETHDenver. My name is Retro, and I'm here to talk about what the spork is Maker Endgame. Maker has one of the most impactful votes coming up in the history of the DAO this month, and this is a little bit of an explainer about the problems that have been occurring, the solutions that we're trying to implement, and how that all comes together in the Endgame Plan. Before we get started though, real briefly again, my name is Retro and my official title is still the intern of the Sustainable Ecosystem Scaling Core Unit, but I'm also filling in as the interim facilitator for the Collateral Engineering Services Core Unit, which is responsible for onboarding both real-world and decentralized collateral to the protocol. My journey to the DAO has basically been playing in data centers and trying to solve business problems with technology. It's also coordinating freight on the global scale. And these days, I work and play in DAOs. Again, one more little break here. Some disclaimers. These views are my own. I do not represent all of Maker. This is definitely not financial advice. This definitely is not legal advice. But for anybody that's experiencing similar problems in their DAOs, this may be mental health advice. Again, just a summary of how the talk today will be broken down. And to start, we have to appreciate again that the DAO originally started as a foundation that looked to hand over ownership of this protocol to a decentralized organization. That really hasn't been done a ton before, and within the last year of operating as a DAO, we've kind of learned some problems. The first one starts at the very top of the governance layer, which is the MIP set, the Maker Improvement Proposal MIP set that we use to direct the organization as well as the evolution of the protocol. The unexpected addressable fields of governance really relates to what is and isn't allowed in Maker and how it works. An example would be, imagine a green field with a concrete slab dropped in it, and there's about 10 rules about what could be built there. From there, the organization may rise straight, but in a decentralized environment, it kind of branches out due to various different reasons that we'll get into a little bit. The main takeaway, though, from using the MIP set over the past year is that there was way too broad of categories of work and strategy that needed to be passed through the MIP framework. To reduce that then, we have to find some way to scope the addressable work that we want the governance layer worrying about and answer some of these questions maybe a little bit more autonomously about how we can do certain things or can I do certain things. Does that really need to go up to a token holder vote? When everything has to go up to a token holder vote, what we started to see was voter apathy, both due to the complexity as well as the volume and the impact that token holders could actually have on the protocol. What we saw in the forums was a lot of arguing instead of aligning on improvement at the DAO. The holder's role really became running the DAO, which related to approving budgets that even had things such as performance bonuses carved out and all sorts of random stuff. When the DAO is put in when the voters are put into a situation like this, they're really not in the position to lead, but they're experiencing a gridlock situation where there's just too much minutia to try to navigate. And most of the time, you can either play and participate in the politics, or you could just take a step back and hope that this self-running machine will keep running until there's something that comes up that you truly care about. But on that concept of something that you truly care about, the contributors were then put in a situation to run the DAO because in situations where proposals needed a wide consensus, only a couple holders would show up. Over the course of the year, there were various attempts to solve this problem, such as introducing delegates, which allowed a token holder who is the main stakeholder in the DAO to give their voting ability to somebody else who is being paid to spend their time in the forum, to participate in those conversations. But what really happened was that contributors became the middle managers of the DAOs that were basically negotiating with delegates on issues that shouldn't have ever been brought up to that layer of governance. The contributors also had the opportunity then to prioritize pet projects. That isn't necessarily a bad thing because we wanted to innovate within the industry and within the organization. But going back to that addressable fields of governance again, the bureaucrats necessarily didn't want to promote this expansive evolution and introducing more teams and growing the workforce. It was more about making sure that their slice of the universe that they were playing in was more protected. Part of that as well is also hiding the complexity of work. So you have a group of token holders, a group of empowered delegates then that are responsible for voting, and a group of people doing the work, putting this up to a vote and saying, go at it on the forum, have fun. We've attempted different things like orchestrating community calls to really unearth and increase the literacy and education of the stakeholders in the DAO, but work was hard to prioritize, and when that occurs, the movement tends to slow down a little bit. Something that was identified during the initiatives to onboard more real-world assets is that we truly needed experts in their field in traditional industries to come and contribute to the DAO. In the current core unit organizational model, these experts would have to be hired by the contributors. There would be minimal oversight by governance then about what defines an expert. And at the end of the day, it was basically just more contributors working on the wrong problems. There was poorly defined projects, and that resulted in misaligned outcomes. When we start to try to explore solutions to the problems that occurred, we want to make sure that the dependencies required to fix the problem are inherent in every level. If you look back to the 4 slides, what I was basically talking about was a strategy layer, a consensus layer, a coordination layer, and an execution layer to the operations of a DAO. So if we start to try to determine solutions to the strategy layer, the first step is really, how do you define what is best for the DAO and what rules should be made to make the process better? One example that we learned a lot from was, again, the onboarding of real-world assets, where originally it started out as an application process. Somebody would submit an application, there would be an initial review done by this independent team, and from there was a whole ton of politics about if the work was good, if this opportunity is good, and in every direction. So if we could just simplify and structure the governance layer, the strategy layer, to really be this executive function of the DAO, then we can start to have greater alignment throughout the entire organization. Once you have a strategy, though, it has to be empowered. You can write it down, you can talk about it all day, but unless you're in a position to actually act on it, then where is it going to go? To do this, we want to both empower the strategy, but then also contain the politics. And contain the politics really appreciates and accepts that the DAO requires humans to operate. If we're going to go to the goal of accomplishing the goal of Maker, which is creating an unbiased world currency that operates as a public good, there's going to be a lot of people involved. So to empower strategy and contain the politics, we start with defining the governance layer purely as a strategy layer. Again, elevating the token holders to being that executive or strategic function of the DAO, and define process owners, or somebody that has to play in the process of consensus, the politics of negotiating and highlighting good strategies or bad strategies. We really want the strategy to develop from this organic place and then allow the consensus to occur across the entire governance layer of the DAO. Maybe not necessarily contributors, but we'll get to that in a minute. From there, what that really breaks down into is that we're establishing a class of governance only for strategy, and we're separating the politics of agreeing on that strategy to a different function. As a little bit of a preview, it's basically the delegates again, but restructured. And the intention of the delegates again were to allow token holders to both use their time more effectively and offload the requirements of studying and learning these concepts to someone else, but also give smaller token holders the ability to rally around a purpose or, in this case, a person and their personal platform to deliver on their intent, even for minority holders. The solution that we believe identified for addressing the bureaucratic elements that occurred within the workforce at the DAO was that we really wanted to lean into this concept of experts. What we're trying to do is hard. I think you can ask any project here that they've run into roadblocks and had to ask for help and bring in people to their ecosystem. And what that represents for Maker as a solution to bureaucracy is putting the expertise in the position to solve those hard problems, but also support building the strategy. And now hopefully you're starting to see this concept emerge where you have somebody who's responsible for defining the strategy, and now they're actually receiving resources from the DAO to do so. Once you have a well-defined strategy that's built by an expert, if you build it right the first way, then it becomes SOP, standard operating procedure, that anybody can use. And to me, this really represents the A of autonomy, which is allow people to come in and do work independently and put them in the position to deliver value. The other thing that processes do is that the processes then manage the workforce. If orchestrated correctly or set up correctly, you have this system of incentives and penalties for doing things the right way or doing things the wrong way. Lastly, again, for the hidden complexity of work, we believe that entrepreneurs are the real answer to this. Underneath the current core unit model, the independent teams receive funding or paid funds for their expenses, but they're not really put into position to drive profit. They're not managing a P&L. It's the core unit's expenses and the DAO's profit. And this was a great experiment, and we've learned a lot that will lead into the end game portion of this presentation. Autonomy is the ability to do what you want within a certain set of constraints. Free will is more of that greenfield exercise. So if we really want to be a DAO, the decentralized part is there, and it could be better. The A really needs to be developed, and the organization is going to represent the culmination of those two. So we've identified some problems. We've identified some solutions or some areas that have alleviated those problems. Now I think it's time to introduce Endgame. So Endgame may sound a little scary, it may have some negative connotations, but the main focus of the concept of an endgame is to put things in a process so that things are just done more consistently from learnings and using the frameworks. The best example of this is chess. Back in the 1950s, when computers were first getting started, grandmasters would use these frameworks to basically programmatically follow the first 5 moves to put themselves in a better position to win. Over time, these days, chess tournaments can see 15, 20, 25 moves following the same process. So think about that from an entrepreneurial standpoint of if you're wanting to start a business, you have a rule book here and you just have to go out and do what you're best at within the system. So that's what Endgame is, and let's start to break down how we attack the problems and solutions with Endgame components. The first one is the Maker Constitution. This is structuring the organization at every level to follow that concept we talked about of strategy, consensus, coordination, and execution. Alignment engineering is the overall principle that the Constitution attempts to tap into, because answering the question of what is best for the DAO needs to be defined somewhere. The Constitution does this by acting as this ossified concept of what is Maker. It's written down, it's voted on, and again, towards the end of March, we'll see if the Maker Constitution in its current form is accepted. The purpose-driven DAO, again, relates to the unbiased global world currency and a public good. And from there, in order to tap into more of these powerful concepts that unlock this decentralized organization, the Maker Constitution defines those concepts of separating the strategy layer and putting people in this position to play their role and only their role within this machine. The structured innovation is created by a process-oriented approach about requiring experts to contribute to the building of new processes. But then once you have these processes, that really leans into unleashing competition and entrepreneurs to play in the ecosystem and create value, both for themselves and for the protocol. Moving from the Constitution, the first group that needs to be appreciated, and it's a difficult concept to try to grasp, is this Constitutional Voting Committee. What a Constitutional Voting Committee is a collection of token holders. They have verified MKR in their wallets, and together they work on this strategy document that defines how Maker can accomplish its purpose-driven goal. It sets the strategy for the organization and then positions delegates to then support strategies. Today, token holders give their tokens to a delegate, the voting power at least, and the only tool that they have is to remove the delegation and give it to somebody else. There's no alignment mechanism there. The constitutional delegates work as the politicians to create that alignment mechanism by setting up 2 delegation contracts that support 2 different strategies that CVCs create. From there, they play the role of the politician to work on building the consensus for the organization based on these well-defined strategies. Their work basically represents voter consensus by the way that MKR utility and incentives are created for staking and participating within the system. Now that we have how the organization works and how the organization agrees on things, we need to see how the organization can program itself. And the way that it does that is by creating focus areas known as scopes. The current draft of the Constitution defines 12 scopes, which talks about the requirements of decentralized collateral to be onboarded, as well as real-world asset collateral to be onboarded, as well as how stability and liquidity must be managed across those assets to create the stablecoin product and position it as best fit within the industry. The scopes are separate, and again, from the focus groups within the CVCs, there's a lot of alignment across who has an interest in what, who has expertise in what. And again, it's wrapped with this incentive mechanism in order to really make sure that the machine is operating effectively. Frameworks are what live within scopes. These are a dual purpose document that both defines the scope area. So one clear example is saying that WBTC is not a decentralized asset because it does require a legal layer in order to pull it back and unwrap it. So that would be a real world asset. That's one example with a couple different scopes. And I'll expand that across 12 different areas of the DAO. You have experts contributing across the product layer, the governance layer, as well as the workforce layer to create this self-sustainable machine. The last thing to bring up then is, what do we do with the workforce? How do we unearth the complexity of work? How do we enable entrepreneurs to participate in this system in a truly decentralized and autonomous way? The solution that's been brought to the table is the creation of SubDAOs, which would be independent DAOs in their own right that contribute and are holistically tied to the Maker core. There is probably an hour-long dissertation that I could give about the tokenomics and how the incentive mechanism works with replacing the burn engine with different mechanisms of value accrual and management. But the main thing for this talk, for this audience within the DAO, is that it structures the workforce into innovation teams that deliver against the frameworks. It also organizes the workforce into specialized areas. There's 3 classes of SubDAOs that allow the teams to specialize and deliver against certain scopes that allows, again, another layer of governance to participate within this alignment and searching mechanism about what opportunities are the best to deliver to the core. The SubDAOs also de-risk the core and remove the opportunity of personal pet projects being delivered because the tokenomics require certain layers of insurance, penalties that would be assessed if work wasn't delivered, as well as opportunities to leverage the core to its truest potential to deliver again on that purpose-driven mission. The Endgame Plan is being voted on this cycle in March. What we have up here is a growing ecosystem where the core is ossified and protected by the 3 rings of scopes. And there's various sub-DAOs with their own culture and incentives and desires circulating around, all contained within the gravity of the Maker ecosystem. So if this sounds like something that interests you, if you're in strategy or if you're another project that wants to contribute to the ecosystem, start paying attention to the forums. If you have Maker, there's probably the biggest vote, like I said, of our history coming up. Why not participate and signal if you want to continue to participate or sit on the sidelines? But thank you, ETHDenver. I'm Retro from MakerDAO, and we are looking for designers, content producers, and governance designers as well. These slides were not great, and we would love any help, so thank you.